The vast expanse of space twinkled with countless stars, but for the Zorgonian Empire, the galaxy had never seemed darker. Their beloved Queen Xylara, ruler of 1,000 worlds, had vanished. The news spread like wildfire across their territories, causing panic and despair among the billions of Zorgonian citizens. In the Grand Palace on the Zorgonian homeworld, Zorg Prime, High Commander Kraz paced back and forth. His forearms were clasped behind his back, and his 3 eyes blinked rapidly in distress. The room was filled with the Empire's top officials, all waiting for him to speak. "We have confirmed it," Kraz said, his voice low and gravelly. "Queen Xylara has been kidnapped by the Drakons." A collective gasp echoed through the room. The Drakons were a warrior race, known for their brutality and advanced defensive systems. They had been at war with the Zorgonians for centuries. "But how?" asked Minister Blorg, his tentacles quivering. "Our queen was supposed to be under the highest protection." Kraz's face darkened. "It was an inside job. Someone betrayed us." The room erupted in angry shouts and accusations. Kraz held up all 4 of his hands, calling for silence. "Blame can wait," he growled. "Right now, we need to focus on getting our queen back." The next few days were a flurry of activity. The Zorgonian fleet, the most advanced in the known galaxy, mobilized for a rescue mission. Thousands of ships, each capable of destroying a small moon, set out towards Drakon space. But as they approached the Drakon homeworld, they met with disaster. The Drakons had somehow upgraded their planetary shield. The once impenetrable Zorgonian weapons bounced off harmlessly. Worse, the Drakons had developed a new type of missile that cut through Zorgonian shields like they were made of paper. The mighty Zorgonian fleet retreated, leaving behind the burning wrecks of hundreds of their ships. It was the worst defeat in their history. Back on Zorg Prime, despair set in. Citizens took to the streets, demanding action. The economy started to crumble as trade between worlds slowed to a trickle. Without their queen, the Empire was falling apart. In a secret underground bunker, Kraz met with his most trusted advisors. Their faces were grim, their usual blue skin pale with worry. "We've tried everything," said General Zix, the head of the military. "Our weapons are useless against their new defenses. We can't even get close to their planet, let alone rescue the queen." "What about negotiations?" asked Diplomat Quix. Kraz shook his head. "The Drakons won't even answer our transmissions. They know they have us cornered." The room fell into a heavy silence. For the first time in millennia, the Zorgonian Empire faced a problem it couldn't solve with its advanced technology or vast resources. Just as all hope seemed lost, a junior officer burst into the room. All eyes turned to him as he struggled to catch his breath. "High Commander," he panted, "we've received a report from one of our deep space scouts. You need to see this immediately." Kraz took the datapad from the officer's trembling hands. As he read, his 3 eyes widened in surprise. "It seems," he said slowly, "that our scout ship has discovered a primitive planet in a remote part of the galaxy. The inhabitants call it Earth." The others looked at him in confusion. "How is this relevant to our crisis, High Commander?" asked Minister Blorg. Kraz's lips curled into what passed for a smile among Zorgonians. "Because, my friends, these humans possess something we have lost, something that might be the key to saving our queen." He tapped the datapad, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a bipedal creature, hairless except for the top of its head, engaged in various activities. The Zorgonians watched in fascination as the human climbed treacherous mountains, dove into deep oceans, and survived in harsh deserts. "These humans," Kraz explained, "lack our technology. They haven't even achieved interstellar travel. But look at how they adapt. See how they use simple tools to overcome challenges that would stump our best scientists." The room buzzed with excitement as the implications sank in. "You think a human could succeed where we have failed?" General Zix asked, his tone a mixture of disbelief and hope. Kraz nodded. "The Drakons have defenses against every type of technology we possess, but they have no experience with the primitive, unpredictable methods these humans use. It's so crazy it just might work, For the first time since the crisis began, a spark of hope ignited in the room. The Zorgonians, masters of technology and rulers of a vast empire, were about to pin their hopes on a species that had barely left its own planet. "Prepare a stealth ship," Kraz ordered. "We're going to Earth. It's time to find ourselves a hero." As the meeting adjourned and plans were set in motion, none of the Zorgonians could have imagined how this decision would change not just their empire, but the entire galaxy. The age of humanity was about to begin, and the universe would never be the same. The Alaskan wilderness stretched out as far as the eye could see. Snow-capped mountains towered in the distance, and dense forests covered the landscape. In this harsh, unforgiving environment, Jake Thompson was in his element. Jake, a former U.S. Navy SEAL, had left behind the world of military operations for a simpler life. At 35, he was in his prime, tall, muscular, with short brown hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. His face, weathered by years of outdoor living, bore a neatly trimmed beard. On this crisp morning, Jake emerged from his small, sturdy cabin, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. He took a deep breath, savoring the clean, cold air. This was home now, far from the chaos and noise of civilization. Jake's day started like any other. He checked his traps, finding a couple of rabbits for dinner. Then he chopped wood, the rhythmic sound of his axe echoing through the forest. Unknown to him, he wasn't as alone as he thought. High above the Earth's atmosphere, cloaked in technology far beyond human understanding, a Zorgonian scout ship hovered. Inside, 3 alien observers watched Jake with growing excitement. "Look at how he adapts to this harsh environment," said Zork, the lead scientist. "He thrives where most species would perish, but he's so primitive," objected Blarg, the security officer. "How can he possibly help us rescue the Queen?" The third Zorgonian, Captain Zeno, silenced them both with a wave of his tentacle. "Keep watching," he ordered. Back on Earth, Jake's peaceful morning was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. A massive grizzly bear, awakened early from hibernation and mad with hunger, burst into the clearing near his cabin. Most humans would have panicked. Jake remained calm. In one fluid motion, he dropped his axe and reached for the hunting rifle leaning against a nearby tree. But the bear was faster than he anticipated. With a roar that shook the ground, the grizzly charged. Jake's fingers brushed the rifle, but he knew he wouldn't have time to aim and fire. In that split second, he made a decision that left the watching Zorgonians gasping in amazement. Instead of going for the gun, Jake grabbed his axe and stood his ground. As the bear rose on its hind legs, easily towering over him, Jake let out a wild yell of his own. The sudden noise startled the bear, making it hesitate for just a moment. That moment was all Jake needed. He swung the axe, not at the bear, but at a nearby dead tree. The rotting wood splintered with a thunderous crack. Startled by the noise and the display of aggression from what should have been easy prey, the bear dropped to all fours and backed away. Jake kept his eyes locked on the bear, axe at the ready, as he slowly retreated towards his cabin. The grizzly, deciding this meal wasn't worth the trouble, lumbered back into the forest. Only when the bear was out of sight did Jake allow himself a small smile. "That was a close one, old boy," he muttered to himself. In the scout ship, the Zorgonians were beside themselves with excitement. "Did you see that?" Zork exclaimed. "He faced down a predator twice his size with nothing but a primitive cutting tool." "And that quick thinking," added Captain Zeno, using noise to confuse and intimidate instead of relying solely on weaponry. Impressive. Even Blarg looked convinced. "I hate to admit it, but I'm starting to see why High Commander Kraz thinks this human might be our best hope." As the day progressed, the Zorgonians continued to observe Jake. They watched as he skillfully tracked and hunted game, navigated through dense forests without any technological aids, and even treated a small wound using only plants he found in the wilderness. By nightfall, as Jake sat by a campfire outside his cabin, the Zorgonians had seen enough. "It's time," Captain Zeno announced. "Prepare for first contact." Down on Earth, Jake was enjoying the quiet evening, unaware that his life was about to change forever. He was roasting the rabbits he'd caught earlier, lost in thought about his past life and the peace he'd found here in Alaska. Suddenly, a bright light filled the clearing. Jake jumped to his feet, instinctively reaching for his rifle. But what he saw made him freeze in disbelief. A ship, unlike anything he'd ever seen, was descending from the sky. It was sleek, silver, and completely silent. As it touched down, a door opened in its side, and three. Blarg let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "I think I'm starting to like you, human." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Jake packed his most essential gear, his trusty combat knife, a compact survival kit, and a few other choice items. The Zorgonians, meanwhile, prepared their ship for departure. As Jake took one last look at his cabin, a pang of sadness hit him. This place had been his refuge, his escape from the complexities of the world. Now he was leaving it behind for the greatest complexity of all galactic politics. "You okay?" Zork asked, coming to stand beside him. Jake nodded. "Yeah, just saying goodbye to my quiet life. Something tells me it's going to be a while before I see this place again." "If it's any consolation," Zork said, "you're about to see wonders beyond your wildest imagination." Jake shouldered his pack and turned to the alien with a wry smile. "Well then, what are we waiting for? We've got a queen to rescue and an empire to save." As they boarded the ship, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, and moments later the clearing was empty, save for the smoldering remains of the campfire. Jake Thompson, the unlikely hero, was headed for the stars. The greatest adventure of his life, and quite possibly the most important mission in galactic history, had begun. The Draken Fortress loomed before Jake Thompson like a mountain of metal and malice. Its jagged spires pierced the alien sky, and force fields shimmered around its perimeter. From his vantage point on a nearby ridge, Jake could see why the Zorgonians had failed in their rescue attempts. The place looked impenetrable, but Jake wasn't Zorgonian. He was human, and humans had a knack for doing the impossible. "Remember," Captain Zeno's voice crackled through the earpiece Jake wore, "our technology can't penetrate their defenses. You're on your own once you're inside." Jake nodded, though he knew the Zorgonians couldn't see him. He was clad in a stealth suit they'd provided, which bent light around him, making him nearly invisible. "Roger that. Any last words of advice?" There was a pause before Zork's voice came through. "Yes. Don't die." Jake couldn't help but grin. "Wasn't planning on it. Wish me luck." With that, he began his descent towards the fortress. The rocky terrain was treacherous, but after years in the Alaskan wilderness, it felt like a walk in the park to Jake. He moved swiftly and silently, his SEAL training kicking in. As he approached the force field, Jake pulled out a device the Zorgonians had given him. It looked like a small metal disc. According to Zork, it would create a brief disruption in the force field, just enough for Jake to slip through. He activated it and waited. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint flicker, a small hole appeared in the shimmering barrier. Jake didn't hesitate. He dove through, rolling to his feet on the other side, just as the force field snapped back into place. He was in. The interior of the fortress was a maze of corridors and chambers, all made of the same dark metallic material. Jake moved cautiously, using every shadow and alcove for cover. Despite the advanced technology all around him, he relied on his most basic skills: stealth, patience, and keen observation. As he navigated the fortress, Jake encountered several Dracon guards. They were fearsome creatures, tall, reptilian, with scales that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. But they were overconfident, relying too heavily on their technology. Jake slipped past them unseen, a ghost in their impenetrable fortress. After what felt like hours of careful navigation, Jake found himself in a vast central chamber. And there, suspended in a glowing energy field, was Queen Zylara. The Zorgonian queen was a sight to behold. She was taller than the other Zorgonians Jake had met, with a regal bearing that was unmistakable even in her captivity. Her multiple arms were bound, and her 3 eyes were closed, but she was clearly alive. Jake's earpiece crackled to life. "Have you found her?" Captain Zeno's voice was tense with anticipation. "Affirmative," Jake whispered. "But she's in some kind of energy field. Any ideas on how to shut it down?" There was a burst of static, then silence. The Drakens were jamming their communication. Jake was truly on his own now. He surveyed the room, looking for anything that might control the energy field. His eyes fell on a console near the Queen's prison. It was covered in alien symbols, completely indecipherable to him. Jake grinned. When in doubt, push buttons. He approached the console, still hidden by his stealth suit. With a deep breath, he began pressing symbols at random. Alarms blared immediately, and Jake winced. Okay, maybe not the best plan. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the chamber. Intruder detected! Secure the prisoner! Jake's stealth suit flickered and died, a casualty of the fortress's security measures. He was visible now, and a squad of Dracon guards was rushing into the chamber. Time for Plan B. Jake reached into his pack and pulled out a small device he'd cobbled together during the journey to the Dracon homeworld. It was a makeshift EMP built from a mix of Earth electronics and Zorgonian tech. He had no idea if it would work, but it was his only shot. As the first Drakengard reached for him, Jake activated the device and threw it at the energy field holding Queen Zylara. There was a blinding flash followed by a deafening boom. When Jake's vision cleared, he saw the energy field flickering and sputtering. The Queen's eyes snapped open and she began to move. "Your Majesty!" Jake shouted, ducking under a Draken's swipe. "We've got to move!" Queen Zylara, to her credit, didn't hesitate. As the energy field collapsed, she leapt from her prison with a grace that belied her size. "Lead the way, human," she said, her voice regal even in the chaos. What followed was a mad dash through the fortress. Jake led the way, using every trick and tactic he knew to evade the Draken guards. The Queen kept pace, her strength surprising Jake. They burst out of the fortress just as the Zorgonian fleet arrived, their ships engaging the Draken defenses in a spectacular light show. A small shuttle swooped down, its hatch opening to reveal Captain Zeno. "Jump!" the captain yelled. Without breaking stride, Jake and Queen Zylara leapt for the shuttle. They landed hard on the deck, and the hatch slammed shut behind them. The shuttle rocketed away from the fortress, weaving through the ongoing space battle. As they caught their breath, Queen Zylara turned to Jake. "You have my gratitude, human. You've saved not just me, but my entire empire." Jake, bruised and exhausted, managed a smile. "All in a day's work, Your Majesty. Though I've got to say, this beats fishing in Alaska." As the shuttle docked with the Zorgonian flagship and jubilant cheers echoed through the corridors, Jake realized his life would never be the same. He had just changed the course of galactic history, and his adventure was far from over. The Zorgonian flagship's grand hall buzzed with excitement. Aliens of various shapes and sizes, all high-ranking officials in the Zorgonian Empire, gathered to celebrate their queen's return and to catch a glimpse of the human who had made it possible. Jake Thompson stood awkwardly at the center of it all. He had traded his stealth suit for a formal outfit the Zorgonians had provided, though he'd insisted on keeping his boots. Some habits die hard. "I feel like a zoo exhibit," Jake muttered to Captain Zeno, who stood beside him. The captain's 3 eyes blinked in amusement. "You're a hero, Jake. The first human to not only venture into deep space, but to also save an entire civilization. It's only natural they're curious." Before Jake could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. Queen Zylara entered the hall, her presence commanding instant respect. She glided towards Jake, her multiple arms moving gracefully as she approached. "Jake Thompson of Earth," she said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "You have done the Zorgonian Empire a great service. We owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Jake bowed awkwardly, not quite sure of the proper protocol. "I'm just glad I could help, Your Majesty. Though I have to admit, this is all a bit overwhelming." The Queen's expression softened, showing an understanding that transcended species. "I can only imagine. You've been thrust into a world beyond anything your people have dreamed of, yet you've adapted admirably." She turned to address the gathered crowd. "Let Jake Thompson's actions serve as a lesson to us all. We have grown complacent in our advanced technology, forgetting the importance of adaptability and ingenuity. Today, a human from a world we considered primitive has shown us the error of our ways." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jake felt a mix of pride and embarrassment at being the center of attention. Queen Zylara continued, "In light of this, I am making a decree. Earth is hereby under the protection of the Zorgonian Empire. Moreover, we will be establishing diplomatic relations with humanity." The hall erupted in excited chatter. Jake's eyes widened in surprise. "Your Majesty," he said, that's a big step." "Are you sure?" The Queen nodded. "The galaxy is changing, Jake. The Draken threat has shown us that we need allies who think differently, who can approach problems from new angles. Humanity has proven its worth through your actions." As the implications of this decision sank in, Jake felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He was no longer just Jake Thompson, former Navy SEAL and wilderness survivalist. He had become humanity's first ambassador to an advanced alien civilization. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Jake found himself in meetings with Zorgonian diplomats explaining Earth's cultures, nations, and political systems. He did his best to represent his species, all the while marveling at the turn his life had taken. "You know," Jake said to Zork during a quiet moment, "when I moved to Alaska, I was trying to get away from the complexities of human society. Now I'm dealing with galactic politics." Zork made a sound that Jake had learned was Zorgonian laughter. "Life has a way of pushing us where we're needed most, Jake. Your skills and perspective are invaluable here." As the Zorgonian fleet prepared to return to Earth, Jake found himself both excited and nervous. How would humanity react to the revelation that not only were they not alone in the universe, but that they were now under the protection of an advanced alien empire? Queen Zylara assured him that the contact would be handled delicately, with Jake acting as an intermediary. "Your world will need time to adjust," she said. "We will proceed at a pace comfortable for your people." On the day of their departure, Jake stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching as the alien world that had been the site of his great adventure grew smaller. Captain Zeno joined him, standing in companionable silence for a moment. "Having second thoughts?" the captain asked. Jake shook his head. "No, just processing. A month ago, my biggest concern was whether I had enough firewood for the winter. Now I'm heading home to tell humanity that we're part of a galactic community." Captain Zeno placed one of his 4 hands on Jake's shoulder. "If anyone can handle this transition, it's you, Jake. You've proven your adaptability time and time again." As they approached Earth, Jake's breath caught in his throat. Seeing his home planet from space, a beautiful blue marble suspended in the darkness, brought tears to his eyes. "It's so small," he whispered. "Yet it has produced beings capable of great things," Queen Zylara said, joining them on the deck. "Your world may be small, Jake, but its potential is vast." The flagship entered Earth's orbit, and Jake prepared himself for what was to come. He would be returning as a hero, a diplomat, and a bridge between 2 worlds. The responsibilities were enormous, but so were the possibilities. As the ship began its descent towards a predetermined landing site, Jake thought about his cabin in Alaska. He had told the Zorgonians he wanted to return there, but now he realized his path had changed. His quest for solitude had led him to the greatest adventure imaginable. "Ready?" Captain Zeno asked as they approached the landing site. Jake nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Ready. Let's introduce Earth to the galaxy." As the ship touched down and the hatch began to open, Jake Thompson stood tall. He had rescued an alien queen, saved an empire, and changed the course of human history. Now he was about to take humanity's first step into a larger universe. The adventure, it seemed, was just beginning.